Hey y'all, Coach in the Fight here. Got y'all's increase with me.
Hey, shalom everybody.
And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the booths and what they're supposed to look like. Many years we've been tabernacling in tents. I think we've been doing that by default. And in this video, we're going to answer, or at least attempt to answer the question, are we required to sleep in a booth made of vegetation, or do we supposed to dwell in it in the daytime, or is sleeping in a tent all day long what's required? So that's some of the stuff we'll be talking about in this video. You want me to call you Joe, or you want me to call you Y'all's Increase? What you want me to call you?
Y'all can call me Joe.
All right, so Joe will be here for our tabernacles here. This will be one of the first time we've had a guest with us during tabernacles, Father willing. But Joe, this is not the first time you've kept tabernacles, right? You want to tell us about your experiences before?
Yeah, a couple times we went to state parks and with a couple group of friends, and they actually built outside of just putting up a tent, their own like Sukkot made from branches, pine branches, and a few shrubs and stuff of that nature. And so it was kind of like just a little memorial type thing that they built. Only a small child could have fit in it, but
okay,
yeah.
So it's more symbolic.
Yeah, because I think the state park had regulations on how much
they can use, how much vegetation they can use. Well, and that's what we're talking about. So you guys otherwise was in a tent. Yep. And so I think many of us have slept in tents, and the reason could be because of translations. So let me go ahead and check that right quick. We see here in the King James Version that it says booths in Leviticus 23 and verse 42. You want to read that verse?
Says, "You shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites born shall dwell in booths." So
whatever they are, we're supposed to dwell in these booths. And we may have to go to the Hebrew on this, because we have this word dwell also, right? But before we do, let's check the other translations. We're looking here in the CEV. Well, no, we're looking at all of the translations. And so we see booths in the KJ21, ASV, even the AMP says booths. But in the CSB, it says shelters. In the CEB, I know that's the Common English Bible, it says huts. KJB is more difficult. It's going to say Sukkah. That don't help at all. It's where we're trying to learn what is a Sukkah or a Sukkot. CEV again is shelters, booths. The DRA says tabernacles. And again, we're trying to define what a tabernacle is. At least what it's supposed to be for these 7 days that we're supposed to be in them. Here you see the ISV actually says tents. That's one of the only versions that we can actually blame that on if we find that it's an error.
Yeah.
Which we'll err on the side of caution and do both. We have no problem sleeping in a tent. But the only thing is, are we supposed to actually dwell in these so-called vegetation-made Sukkahs during this time? But that's all I see. Booths, shelters. I see one tent. Now there's another tent in the NCB. But other than that, looks like that's all we have to go on. So let's go over and let's look at the Hebrew and see what it says. Looking in Bible Hub at verse 42 out of Leviticus 23. Of course, we got to read it backwards. But it says in booths. And we are to dwell. You shall dwell in booths. So let's look at these words. So the first word we see could be pronounced Sukkah. If you pronounce all of the syllables, Sukkah, translates to booth, cottage, covert, pavilion, tabernacle, tent in the KJV, and NASB is booth, shelter, temporary shelter, booths, or a canopy. We haven't seen that. And that would actually be the opposite of what I'm thinking. Because, right? Because we were told that these, or at least somebody's opinion, that these booths are supposed to be three-sided. They don't have a roof, and they don't even have a front side. That they're just something that you will go. And that reminds me of when I was preparing for this video, I was thinking on this. Isn't that what the nativity scene is?
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought about.
Yeah, you thought about that too, huh?
Yeah, it actually popped into my head. I was like, now that I think about it, it does look like a nativity scene that I've seen some people put up. And like I was telling you that another Israel church, they basically hung out in the parking lot, and had a canopy type thing over their head, and they just hung out all day. I don't know if they stayed there overnight.
So something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this right here would allow the rain to come through. If it were to rain, you're going to get wet. But a canopy, on the other hand, it would actually block the rain.
Right.
So again, that's why we have to do this Bible study, because they're opposite. This one here, the rain would come in, but the wind would not. But then in a canopy, the wind would come in, but the rain would not. So we have to look at that. But notice how big this one is and how they're decorating it and all of that. And so we do have, the Jewish interpretation to go by. But let's go back and let's see what the Hebrew says.
Yeah, I remember one year we did that. We decorated our tent with the palm branches and moss. So
we're not really given a lot. You notice it's the same thing. Booths, canopies, hut, layer, pavilion, shelter, temporary shelter. But the thing is, when we get over into the book of Nehemiah, we start to see that they was actually going out and using tree branches. You see right here in 8 and 15, Nehemiah 8 and 15. Mm-hmm. You read that?
And that they should publish and proclaim in all their cities and in Jerusalem, saying, Go forth unto the mount, and fetch olive branches, and pine branches, and myrtle branches, and palm branches, and branches of thick trees to make booths, as it is written.
Okay, and so that's what we're talking about, as it is written. Okay, where is it written? I'm at the extent of my memory as far as where it's written. So let's go in and let's see if we can get the artificial intelligence to help us find it. We'll ask ChatGPT to dig it out. Where is it written? So here's the question I'll ask. Talking about Nehemiah 8 and 15. I say this verse says that it is written that we are to build our Sukkahs out of branches and such. We have always slept in tents for the week, but now we are wondering if we are doing it wrong, sleeping in a tent. It seems the scripture is saying that we are to hang out in man-made huts in the daytime. And then the verse again is Nehemiah 8 and 15. This should actually make them dig out what it actually says.
You're asking a great question, and it's one that many thoughtful observers of Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles, have wrestled with. What does Scripture actually require about the construction and use of the Sukkah, booth, hut? Specifically, you're reflecting on Nehemiah chapter 8 verse 15, where the people are told to gather branches from various trees to build booths, and you're wondering if sleeping in tents is missing the mark. Let's take a look at the relevant text and context. Nehemiah chapter 8 verse 15, KJV, and that they should publish and proclaim in all their cities, and in Jerusalem, saying, Go forth unto the mount, and fetch olive branches, and pine branches, and myrtle branches, and palm branches, and branches of thick trees, to make booths, as it is written. This is a clear reference to building booths, Sukkot, from tree branches, which echoes the original command in Leviticus chapter 23 verses 40, 42 to 43. And ye shall take you on the first day the boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and the boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook. And ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. Ye shall dwell in booths 7 days. That your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths, when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. What does booths, Sukkot, mean in Scripture? The Hebrew word, sukkah, means a temporary shelter, typically made of natural materials like branches or foliage. According to the Torah, Israelites are to dwell in these huts for 7 days during Sukkot to commemorate their ancestors' time in the wilderness. The booths were man-made, temporary, constructed from natural materials, branches, etc. often open-roofed or loosely covered, to see the stars or let in some rain, light, depending on interpretation. Tents versus booths. Are you doing it wrong? Here's the honest answer. Maybe, depending on how literally or traditionally you interpret the command. Tents are temporary shelters, so they technically capture the spirit of Sukkot, a reminder of temporary dwelling. They are not made from natural branches as described in Nehemiah and Leviticus. They are fully enclosed and modern, which doesn't align with the traditional Sukkah structure. Tents may not provide the same visual or symbolic cues, like the open roof or branch covering, that point to God's protection in the wilderness. Traditional Sukkah, built with walls, can be of any material, cloth, wood, etc. Roof, called sechak, made from natural plant material like palm, bamboo, or tree branches, not fully covered, should provide shade but still allow some visibility of the sky. Intended for dwelling, eating meals, spending time, and, ideally, even sleeping in it. So what should you do? Here are some thoughtful options depending on your conviction and community. 1. Build a sukkah using branches and natural materials. Following Nehemiah and Leviticus, this would be the most biblically aligned way. Even a simple structure covered with tree branches fulfills the command. 2. Use a tent with modifications. Some people use a tent but add a roof of branches or construct it partially from natural materials to reflect the command more closely. 3. Use the tent for sleeping, sukkah for eating and fellowship. Many people sleep in a tent for comfort, safety, but eat, study, and gather in a traditional sukkah during the day. This honors the command while balancing practical needs. Summary. Aspect tents scriptural booths, Sukkot, temporary shelter check mark. Made from natural branches cross mark check mark. Enclosed, protected from elements check mark cross mark, partially. Open roof, symbolism of God's protection warning, less visible, check mark. Eating, living in during Sukkot check mark. Sleeping in check mark, ideal in tradition. Not required in Torah. Scroll final thought, sleeping in tents may not be wrong per se, especially if your intent is sincere and you are commemorating Israel's wilderness journey. But if you're looking to align more closely with the biblical model in Nehemiah chapter 8 verse 15 and Leviticus 23, then building a sukkah from branches and using it at least during the day, for meals and time with others, is a beautiful and meaningful practice.
What do you think?
That's a temporary dwelling. I don't know. That one's. It's leaning more towards you building the thing with your branches and stuff, because when you get down to the heart of it, if you were actually stuck out in the wilderness and didn't have a tent, your shelter would be just that. You'd have to find you some branches and make you a shelter.
So I asked, is there a textual basis for these branches and seeing the sky and such? Or is the word sukkah the only proof we have? If so, we must analyze the letters of the Hebrew word individually based on the pre-exilic understandings, of course, of the letters to find the branches and such. That makes sense? In other words, if what he's saying, from what I gather, he only has Leviticus to go back to. Unless it's in the Apocrypha somewhere. And we could do that next. But right now, he's saying that he's going back to Leviticus and the word Sukkah, which means temporary booth. Okay, so what I'm saying is you have any other proof than that? And if you're saying that you're getting it from the word, prove it. Let's see it. Let's break it down letter by letter and let's see it.
Yeah, I definitely think temporary booth could, be many different things in that regard then.
Your car.
yeah, your car.
You're digging into something rich and important here, not just what a sukkah is by tradition, but what it is textually and linguistically, especially through the lens of ancient Hebrew letter meanings, pre-exilage, Paleo Hebrew. Let's take this step by step.
While he's writing, let's check him out, see what he says. So you have Samek, which is a thorn or a barrier, shelter or protection. Let's look at the Hebrew letters for ourselves. Well, we'll go with this one. It's more paleo. Not quite used to that one, but we'll try it. So you have Samek, which is makes the S sound. It means prop, support, prop, aid, assist, slow twisting, turning aside like a propped plant. So here's your vegetation. We asked them to find the vegetation. We found it ourselves. What was the other letter he said? Sukkah. So you have the kapha. The next letter is the kapha. That's going to be something like a hand, palm of the hand, a wing to allow, to cover, to open the hand, or the power of suppress or to lift. So they cover, right? So you have the vegetation and cover for the kapha. So now the last letter is the ha, Sukkah. So that's the hawaha, behold, to show or to reveal. So you have, it's made of branches, it's covering, and it's for a show or to reveal. It's a little bit difficult, but we can see where they're getting it. So we're at least convinced down that it's made out of vegetation and that it's temporary shelter. So I'm kind of agreeing what he's saying here. I think we already knew this before we started, but we wanted to, do the Bible study to show that, we are supposed to actually be in a shelter made of vegetation, But anyway, let's go ahead and let's finish, see what he has to say.
1. Is there textual basis beyond the word sukkah itself? Yes, there is explicit textual support for branches and natural materials, most notably in Leviticus chapter 23 verses 40, 42. And ye shall take you on the first day the boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and the boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook. And ye shall dwell in booths, Sukkot, 7 days. Also, Nehemiah chapter 8 verse 15, fetch olive branches, and pine branches, and myrtle branches, and palm branches, and branches of thick trees, to make booths, as it is written. So we are not just working from the word sukkah alone. The Torah and Nehemiah both specify branches, and connect them to the building of the booths. As for the roof being open enough to see the sky, stars, that's rabbinic tradition, e.g., Talmudic interpretation in Sukkah 2a-2b, but not explicit in Torah. That idea grows from the concept that the sukkah must be a temporary, fragile structure, symbolizing dependence on God. Still, it's not directly commanded in the text. 2. The word, sukkah, a Paleo Hebrew breakdown. You're asking, if we didn't have Leviticus and Nehemiah, could we infer the booth, branch structure from the letters themselves? Let's try. The word sukkah in Hebrew is spelled letters, samek, kaf, hey. Let's look at each one as it would have been understood in Paleo Hebrew, where each letter was also a picture symbol, often tied to a root meaning. Samek, pictograph, thorn or support, a circular shape, like a protective barrier. Meaning, support, protection, a shelter, something that surrounds or holds. In sukkah, possibly reflects the enclosure or protective nature of the booth, a shelter. Kaf, pictograph, open palm or hand. Meaning, to allow, cover, bend, open hand, like a covering hand. In sukkah, suggests covering or sheltering, possibly the sechak, the branch roof covering, which is a central part of a sukkah. Hey, pictograph, a man with arms raised, behold. Meaning, revelation, breath, to behold something, to point. In sukkah, could symbolize the visible, experiential aspect, perhaps the heavenly view, or seeing the sky, aligning with the idea of the sukkah as a place of divine encounter or awareness. Paleo Hebrew insight, summary, letter symbol meaning how it relates to sukkah. Samek, thorn, barrier shelter, protection the walls or enclosure of the sukkah. Kaf, open hand covering. Palm the roof of branches, sechak, hey, man, behold revelation, breath the spiritual openness, seeing heaven or divine presence. So yes, from a Paleo Hebrew lens, the very structure and meaning of the word supports the concept of a fragile, hand-built shelter made of natural materials, including a roof, covering, and an experience of openness, revelation, which could support the rabbinic idea of seeing the sky. So what does this all mean? The Torah gives direct textual instruction to build booths from branches. The word, broken down by Paleo Hebrew letters, also reflects the core features of such a booth: shelter, natural connection, covering, and divine awareness. The idea of seeing the stars is not explicitly commanded in Scripture, but can be inferred from tradition and the symbolic meaning of the open roof in the word's root concept. Conclusion: yes, there is textual basis for using branches, Leviticus, Nehemiah, and the Paleo Hebrew structure of the word further reinforces this understanding. If you're pursuing a return to the ancient, original understanding of the feast, this deeper look into the word itself supports the use of natural materials and intentional design, not just any shelter, but one that reflects protection, connection, divine encounter, and fragility.
Well, we're definitely pursuing a return to the ancient, original understanding of the feast. That's of the utmost importance as far as we're concerned. As far as I'm concerned, because if we're doing it wrong, we're not getting the benefit. And like I just learned here a little bit of Hebrew language here, where it has that hey or that hawaha at the end of the Sukkah, and it's pointing to the word reveal, but it's also the image of a man lifting his hands. So that's us. He's talking about us in this temporary booth, right, getting these insights or these revelations. So that's real deep. But anyway, I think I'm convinced that we got some work to do as far as going out here and building us a shelter.
Yeah.
But before we end, let's go back and give Abraham some credit, because if we remember, he is the first one who actually, did this Sukkah. So let's see how this compares to him. You remember the days when I used to do this all by hand, huh?
Yeah.
All he has was the scripture, which is good because now we can verify what it says. But what we're going to ask him, he says, okay, so Abraham is the example, the booth that he had in the original feast as described in the book of Jubilees. That would have been an example that we have. So we'll let him bring that out and talk to us about that in closing.
Great question, and yes, you're right to turn to Abraham as a possible origin point or example for the original observance of Sukkot. In fact, this idea is preserved in Jubilees, part of the Second Temple era writings, sometimes called apocryphal or pseudepigraphal depending on the tradition. Let's explore Abraham's connection to Sukkot in Jubilees and elsewhere, and we'll also gather references from other non-canonical writings if they exist. Book 1, Abraham and the Feast of Tabernacles in Jubilees, Candle Jubilees 1620-31, abridged for clarity. And Abraham built booths for himself and for his servants on this festival. And he was the first to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles on the earth. And during these 7 days he brought each day to the altar a burnt offering. And he blessed his Creator who had created him in his generation. And Abraham rejoiced and made this feast during 7 days, rejoicing with all his heart and with all his soul. And he erected booths for himself and his household, and thus was it ordained and written on the heavenly tablets concerning Israel and its generations forever. Key takeaways from Jubilees. Abraham is explicitly described as the first to celebrate Sukkot. He built booths, Sukkot, same term as in Torah. He kept it for 7 days, just as Leviticus 23 prescribes. The feast was recorded in heaven as a permanent ordinance for Israel, a common motif in Jubilees. Abraham's celebration was a response to God's blessing, likely linked to Isaac's promised birth and the deliverance from Sodom and other enemies. Why it matters. This portrayal in Jubilees gives us a pre-Sinai origin for Sukkot, rooted in the faith and practice of the patriarch Abraham. It also reinforces that the booth-building practice was not merely symbolic, but a real, physical activity connected to worship and remembrance.
He actually learned that this is why Moses and Elijah was there with the Messiah on Mount Tabor. That was during the Feast of Tabernacles. That's why the disciples wanted to build a booth for them there. Yeah, they was trying to create that tabernacling environment. And you think about it, they wouldn't have went to Walmart and bought a tent. If the Messiah had said, yes, we need a tent, they would have started grabbing vegetation and they would have put it together.
And it makes me think, wasn't Paul, who was the tent maker?
Paul.
So, what was he making tents?
For tabernacles.
Yeah, for tabernacles.
Yeah. Anyway, hope you guys got something out of this video as far as these booths are concerned. I believe we've been educated.
Absolutely.
We have our marching orders here, and so we'll be out here picking on some heads, bushes, and some other stuff as we put our booths together. And you guys tell us how you plan on doing your tabernacling this year, if you plan on building it from vegetation, or if you're simply going to take the rain fly off of your tenting so you can see the sky. Y'all let us know down in the comment section, and I'll see you down there.
See y'all.
Shalom.